Captain Lee Dong-min stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at the stars beyond the viewing window. His crew had been exploring the outer edges of known space for 3 months now. It was quiet work, mapping new systems and checking for signs of life. Nothing exciting had happened in weeks. "Captain," called Dr. Park Soo-jin from her station, "I'm getting something strange on the communication array." Lee walked over to her console. Soo-jin was the ship's expert on alien languages and cultures. If she thought something was strange, it probably was. "What kind of strange?" he asked. "It's a signal, but it's very weak. The pattern looks like it might be a distress call, but it's in a language I've never seen before." Soo-jin frowned at her screen. "It's been repeating for hours," Lee nodded. "Can you clean it up?" "I'm trying, but it will take time. Maybe a few days." For 3 days, Soo-jin worked on the signal. She ran it through every translation program they had. Finally, late one evening, she called Lee to her lab. "I think I've got it," she said, looking tired but excited. "Captain, you need to hear this." She pressed a button and a voice filled the room. It was alien, but the translation made the words clear and heartbreaking. "This is Elder Cathara of the Villani people. Our world is dying. Our sun grows hot too fast. The ice melts, the seas rise, and our crops fail. We have asked the Great Council of Stars for help many times, but they do not answer. If anyone hears this message, please help us. We are running out of time." Lee felt something cold in his stomach.
"How long has this been broadcasting?"
"Based on the signal decay, probably years," Soo-jin said quietly. "Years?" Lee couldn't believe it. "And no one has responded?" Soo-jin shook her head. "I checked the galactic communication logs. The Villani have sent hundreds of requests for help to the Galactic Council. Every single one was marked as low priority or economically non-viable." Lee clenched his fists. The Galactic Council was supposed to help species in need, but they seemed to only care about profit and politics. "What do we know about these Villani?" he asked. Soo-jin pulled up everything she had found. "They're peaceful farmers. No advanced weapons, no rare minerals on their planet. They live simple lives growing food and making art. Their world is called Vethmore, about 2 weeks' travel from here. And their sun is really dying. The data they included shows stellar aging at an impossible rate. Something is making their star burn much hotter and faster than it should. If their measurements are right, their world will be uninhabitable within 2 years." Lee was quiet for a long moment. 2 years. An entire species would die and no one cared because they had nothing valuable to trade. "Sir?" Soo-jin asked. "What are we going to do?" Lee thought about Earth's rules. Human ships were supposed to avoid getting involved in alien politics. They were new to galactic society and couldn't afford to make enemies. But he also thought about the voice in that message. Desperate, tired, but still hoping someone would care. "Set course for Vethmore," he said. Soo-jin blinked. "Sir, we don't have authority to—" "I know what we don't have authority to do," Lee interrupted. "But I also know what's right. Prepare the ship." 2 weeks later, they arrived at the Villani system. Lee had never seen anything so heartbreaking. Vethmore had once been a beautiful blue and green world, but now massive storms covered half the planet. The ice caps were gone and brown water covered what used to be land. "Dear God," whispered Commander Kim Tae-ho, Lee's second-in-command. "How are they still alive down there?" "Barely," Soo-jin said, reading her sensors. "I'm detecting population centers, but they're all moving inland as the water rises." Lee opened a communication channel. "This is Captain Lee Dong-min of the Earthship Soul's Pride. We received your distress call. We're here to help." For a long moment, there was no response. Then a tired voice came through the speakers. "Earthship, this is Elder Cathara. Did you say you're here to help?" "Yes," Lee said simply. There was another pause, then something that sounded like crying. We had given up hope. No one has answered our calls for so long. We're answering now. Can we send a team down to meet with you?" Yes, of course, but forgive me for asking. What do you want in return?" Lee felt his heart break a little. These people had been abandoned so long that they couldn't believe someone would help them without wanting something back. "Nothing," he said. "We want nothing in return." The silence was longer this time. When Cathara spoke again, her voice was shaking. "You would help us for nothing?" "Yes." Commander Kim prepared a shuttle and took a small team to the surface. What they found was worse than the sensors had shown. The Villani were tall, thin beings with large eyes and gentle faces. Their cities were flooding, their farms were dying, and their people were slowly starving. Cathara met them at what used to be a spaceport but was now surrounded by water. She was old and tired, but when she saw the humans, she began to cry. In all our years of asking for help, she said, "You are the first to come. Why?" Kim looked around at the dying world and the desperate people. "Because it's the right thing to do." Cathara fell to her knees. "Can you really help us? Can you save our people?" Kim helped her stand. "I don't know how yet," he said honestly. "But we'll find a way. That's a promise." When Kim returned to the ship, he found Lee staring at the data about Vethmor's sun. The readings were worse than they had thought. The star was aging at 10 times the normal rate. "How long do they really have?" Lee asked. 18 months, maybe less," Kim replied. "And, Captain, there are over 200 million Vellani on that planet." Lee closed his eyes. 200 million lives and 18 months to save them. It seemed impossible. But he thought about Cathara's tears, about a people who had been abandoned by everyone. "Send a message to Earth," he said. "Tell them we need to talk." The meeting room in Earth's capital was full of important people, but Lee could feel their doubt. He had just finished explaining the Vellani situation to the United Earth Authority. Some faces showed sympathy, others showed worry. "Captain Lee," said Director Chen Wei-Ming, "what you've described is terrible, but we must think carefully. Earth is still new to galactic politics. We cannot afford to make enemies." Lee had expected this response. "Director, we're talking about 200 million innocent lives. Lives that the Galactic Council has already decided not to save," replied Admiral Park Sion-ho. "There must be reasons," Dr. Su-Jin stepped forward. "I researched those reasons, Admiral. The Vellani have no rare metals, no advanced technology, and no strategic military position. The Council doesn't want to help them because there's no profit in it." "That's not our problem," said another official. "Earth has our own people to think about first." Before Lee could respond, the room's doors opened. A tall, blue-skinned alien entered, followed by 2 guards. It was Ambassador Kilan of the Zenthari, one of the most powerful species in the Galactic Council. "Captain Lee," Kilan said in perfect English, "I have come to discuss your recent activities." Lee stood straighter. "Ambassador," Kilan walked to the center of the room. "The region around Vethmor is claimed by the Krulon hegemony. They consider any interference in that area an act of war against them. The Krulon want to let the Vellani die so they can strip mine their planet," Lee said. "What the Krulon want is not your concern," Kilan replied coldly. "What should concern you is that helping the Vellani could destroy Earth's chances of joining the Galactic Council. Is one dying species worth making enemies of the entire galaxy?" The room fell silent. Lee looked around at the Earth officials. He could see them thinking about trade deals, defense treaties, and humanity's future among the stars. He understood their position, but he couldn't accept it. "Yes," he said simply. "It is worth it." Quilan's eyes narrowed. "You would risk your entire species' future for aliens you barely know?" "I would risk it to do what's right." Quilan studied Lee for a long moment, then turned to the Earth officials. "Choose carefully. Help the Vellani and Earth will face the consequences." With that, the ambassador left. The room erupted in angry voices. Some officials demanded that Lee be removed from command. Others argued about the risks to Earth. Lee listened to them fight and felt his heart sink. Then Director Chen raised his hand for silence. "The official position of the United Earth Authority is that we cannot support a rescue mission to Vethmor. The risks are too great." Lee nodded slowly. He had expected this too. But as Lee left the building, something unexpected happened. Dr. Su-Jin was waiting for him outside. "The government won't help," she said, "but that doesn't mean no one will." Over the next few days, Lee discovered what Su-Jin meant. The story of the Vellani had leaked to Earth's news networks. People were angry that their government would abandon an entire species to save money and political relationships. Engineer Choi Hai-wan was the first to volunteer. She was one of Earth's best spacecraft designers, and she offered her services for free. "My grandmother always told me that having power means nothing if you don't use it to protect people who can't protect themselves," she explained. Pilot Yoon Bo-ram came next. She was known for her skill in combat, but she said she wanted to use her abilities to save lives instead of taking them. Soon, hundreds of volunteers joined the effort. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and ordinary citizens all wanted to help. Corporations began donating supplies and ships. Even some military officers quietly offered their support. Lee found himself leading something much bigger than a rescue mission. It was becoming a movement. Dr. Sujin had been working on a plan. "We can't save their planet," she explained to Lee and the other volunteers, "but we might be able to save their people." "How?" asked Commander Kim. "We find them a new world and move them there." "All of them," Choi Hae-won whistled. 200 million people? That would take hundreds of ships and years of work." "Then we get hundreds of ships and take years," Sujin said firmly. The plan was ambitious beyond anything humans had ever attempted. They would need to find a suitable planet, prepare it for Volani life, and then transport an entire civilization across dangerous space. The Galactic Council wouldn't help and the Krulon would try to stop them. But as word spread, more help arrived. A mining company donated transport ships. A technology corporation offered advanced life support systems. Citizens raised money to buy fuel and supplies. Lee realized that while Earth's government had said no, Earth's people had said yes. The breakthrough came when Commander Kim discovered what was really happening to Vethmor's son. Hidden deep in Galactic Council files was information about an ancient war fought in the Volani system. Orbital weapons had been used and some had damaged the star itself, causing it to age rapidly. "The Council has known all along," Kim reported. "They know the Volani are dying because of weapons used in someone else's war. They just don't care." This news made Earth's citizens even angrier. The donations increased and more volunteers joined the mission. Finally, Lee received an unofficial message from Director Chen. "The government cannot officially support your mission," it said, "but we won't stop it either. You have 6 months to prepare. After that, you're on your own. 6 months to organize the largest rescue operation in human history." It seemed impossible. But Lee looked around at all the volunteers working day and night to help people they had never met, and he felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Hope Engineer Choi was already designing new types of evacuation ships. Pilot Yoon was training other pilots for the dangerous journey ahead. Dr. Sujin was searching star charts for a new world the Volani could call home. And in the back of everyone's mind was the knowledge that the Krulon were out there, waiting to stop them. But for now, that didn't matter. What mattered was that when the Volani had needed someone to care, humans had answered. Lee opened a communication channel to Vethmor. "Elder Cathara, this is Captain Lee. We're coming back and we're bringing help." Lee stood in the command center of the largest space fleet humans had ever assembled. 300 ships of all sizes filled the space around Earth. Some were military vessels, others were converted cargo haulers, and many were civilian ships volunteered by their owners. All of them had one purpose: save the Volani. "Fleet status report," Lee called out. Commander Kim checked his displays. "All ships ready, Captain. We have evacuation vessels, mobile habitats, terraforming equipment, and enough supplies for a 5-year operation." "Any word from Dr. Sujin?" "She found them a world," Kim smiled. "A planet called Kepler 442c. Similar size to Vethmor, breathable atmosphere, but completely empty of life." Lee nodded. An empty world meant they could shape it however the Volani needed. Engineer Choi had spent months designing terraforming machines that could turn bare rock into farmland. "The bad news," Kim continued, "is that it's on the far side of Krulon space. Every ship we send will have to pass through their territory." Lee had expected this. The Krulon controlled the space lanes between Vethmor and most suitable worlds. They would try to stop the evacuation, claiming it violated their borders. "We'll deal with that when we have to," Lee said. "Right now, let's focus on getting our people ready." The first evacuation ships reached Vethmor 3 weeks later. What they found was worse than before. The rising seas had swallowed more cities and massive storms raged across the planet. But the Volani were ready for them. Elder Cathara had organized her people perfectly. The youngest and oldest would go first, then families with small children. The healthy adults would go last, staying to help with the evacuation until the very end. Pilot Yoon commanded the escort fighters that protected each group of evacuation ships. The journey to Kepler 442c took 2 weeks, and every trip was dangerous. The Krulon had patrol ships everywhere, and they were getting bolder about stopping human vessels. "They're testing us," Yoon reported after another close encounter, "seeing how far they can push before we fight back." But the evacuation continued. Ship after ship carried Volani families away from their dying world. Each transport became a small community, with humans and Volani working together to make the long journey bearable. Dr. Sujin spent most of her time on the transports. helping the two species understand each other. She discovered that the Villani had an amazing knowledge of how plants and animals work together. Their simple farming methods were actually incredibly sophisticated. They don't just grow crops, she explained to Lee during one of their regular communications. They grow entire ecosystems. Every plant, every insect, every bit of soil has a purpose. This discovery changed everything. Engineer Choi realized that human technology combined with Villani ecological knowledge could create something neither species could achieve alone. The new world wouldn't just be a copy of old Vethmore. It would be better. But the Krulon were becoming a bigger problem. High Admiral Vextar, their military leader, began intercepting more evacuation ships. His forces would board the vessels, claiming to search for contraband, but really just trying to scare the refugees. "This is Krulon space," Vextar announced during one confrontation with Lee's flagship. "Your presence here is illegal." "We're conducting a humanitarian rescue," Lee replied calmly. "These people are refugees fleeing a natural disaster. These people are trespassing. Turn back now or face the consequences." Lee looked at his bridge crew. They were all volunteers who had left comfortable lives on Earth to help strangers. None of them showed any fear. "We're not turning back," Lee said. Vextar's image on the screen showed sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "Then you have chosen your fate, human." The Krulon attacks began small. Disabled engines, damaged communication systems, nothing that would kill anyone but enough to slow down the evacuation. Lee realized they were trying to make the rescue take so long that Vethmore would die before it was finished. He couldn't let that happen. Lee made a difficult decision. He split the fleet into smaller groups that could avoid Krulon patrols more easily. It was more dangerous for each individual ship, but it meant more refugees could escape. The strategy worked, but at a cost. Several transport ships went missing, and Lee had no way to know if they had been captured or simply lost in the vast emptiness of space. Meanwhile, on the new world, the terraforming was going better than anyone had hoped. The first Villani arrivals worked with human engineers to design cities that felt like home, but could withstand the different weather patterns of their new planet. Young Mothek, a Villani who had become something like a translator between the two species, spent his days helping families settle into their new lives. He had learned to speak human languages and often served as a bridge when misunderstandings arose. "Your people are amazing," he told Commander Kim during one of his visits to the human base. "You risk your lives for strangers." "We have never seen anything like this," Kim smiled. "Maybe you haven't met the right strangers before." But as the evacuation progressed, the challenges grew bigger. Vethmore's sun was getting hotter faster than predicted. The planet had maybe 8 months left, not the year they had hoped for. And the Krulon attacks were getting worse. The worst incident happened when a transport carrying 3,000 Villani children was surrounded by Krulon warships. Pilot Yoon led a desperate rescue mission, but her small fighter squadron was vastly outnumbered. Just when it looked hopeless, something unexpected happened. Ships from other species began arriving to help. Some were traders who had heard about the rescue and wanted to assist. Others were military vessels from species that were getting tired of Krulon bullying. "This is Captain Keksara of the Zenthari vessel Bright Star," came a transmission. "We are here to escort the refugee ships." Lee couldn't believe it. The same Zenthari who had warned Earth not to help were now sending their own ships to assist the evacuation. But the biggest surprise came from Ambassador Quilon himself. His ship arrived at Kepler 442c, carrying medical supplies and volunteer doctors from a dozen different species. "Why?" Lee asked when they met on the surface of the new world. Quilon looked around at the bustling construction sites where humans and Villani were building a civilization together. "Because you were right," the ambassador said simply. "Some things are worth the risk." The attack came without warning. Lee was reviewing evacuation schedules when alarms began screaming throughout his flagship. Commander Kim rushed to the bridge with terrible news. "Captain, we have a massive Krulon fleet dropping out of hyperspace. At least 50 warships led by High Admiral Vexitar himself." Lee looked at the tactical display and felt his heart sink. The Krulon force was 3 times larger than anything they had faced before. His own fleet was mostly civilian ships with light weapons, designed for rescue work, not combat. "Open a channel to Vextar," Lee ordered. The Krulon admiral appeared on screen, his reptilian features twisted in anger. "Captain Lee, your illegal activities end today. You will surrender all refugee ships and return to your home system immediately. Admiral Vextar, we are conducting a humanitarian rescue. These people's world is dying. That is not my concern. This is Krulon space and you are invaders. You have 1 hour to surrender or we will destroy every human ship. The transmission ended. Lee stared at the screen for a moment, then turned to his bridge crew. They all looked scared, but none of them looked like they wanted to give up. Send a message to Earth, Lee said quietly. Tell them what's happening here. But before Earth could respond, something else happened. Elder Keithar's voice came through the communication system from the surface of Vethmore. Captain Lee, we have been listening to the Krulon demands. We cannot let you die for us. We will stay on our world and accept our fate. Lee felt something hot and angry rise in his chest. Elder Keithara, we didn't come this far to quit now. But your ships will be destroyed. Your people will die because of us. Our people will die fighting for what's right. That's a death we can accept. From across the fleet, messages began coming in from other ship captains. Not one of them wanted to abandon the Villani. They had come too far and sacrificed too much to give up now. Then young Mothic's voice joined the conversation. Elder Keithara, with respect, the humans came to save us. Now it is time for us to stand with them. What happened next surprised everyone. The Villani people from across their dying world began volunteering to help fight the Krulon. They couldn't pilot human ships or operate human weapons, but they could serve as extra crew members, freeing up humans for combat duties. We will not hide while our friends die for us, Mothic declared. When Earth received Lee's message, the response was immediate. Every available human warship began racing toward Vethmore. It would take them weeks to arrive, but the message was clear. Attack one human rescue mission and you faced all of humanity. The battle began at dawn on Vethmore's last continent. Krulon fighters swept down from space trying to destroy the evacuation sites on the planet's surface. Pilot Yoon led her squadron in a desperate defense, darting between the massive Krulon ships like tiny birds attacking hawks. In space, Lee tried to keep his civilian ships protected while the few armed escorts fought a hopeless battle against overwhelming odds. The Krulon had bigger ships, better weapons, and more experience, but they hadn't counted on human stubbornness. Engineer Choi made a decision that would haunt Lee forever. Her ship was carrying terraforming equipment that could be converted into a massive bomb. When 3 Krulon destroyers surrounded a transport full of Villani children, she didn't hesitate. Captain, this is Choi. Tell my family I kept my grandmother's promise. Choi, no, Lee shouted, but it was too late. Choi's ship rammed into the lead Krulon destroyer and exploded in a flash of light that could be seen from the planet's surface. The blast destroyed all 3 enemy ships and saved the transport, but Lee felt a piece of his heart die with his brave engineer. The battle raged for hours. Human ships were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced, and the evacuation sites on Vethmore were under constant attack. Just when it seemed hopeless, the unexpected happened again. More alien ships began arriving. First came the Zenthari fleet led by Ambassador Kilon, then ships from a dozen other species. They had all heard about the human rescue mission and decided they couldn't stand by while the Krulon committed genocide. This is Ambassador Quilon to all ships, came the transmission. The Galactic Council has voted. The Krulon attack on humanitarian vessels is declared an act of aggression against all civilized species. You are ordered to withdraw immediately. Vextar's response was to attack the newly arrived ships. He had gone too far to back down now. The tide of battle slowly began to turn. The combined fleet had more ships than the Krulon, and they were fighting for something more important than territory or resources. They were fighting for the idea that helping innocent people was worth any risk. Lee found himself leading a boarding party onto Vextar's flagship. The Krulon had been using it to coordinate attacks on the evacuation transports, and it had to be stopped. The fighting inside the ship was brutal and close range. In the flagship's command center, Lee faced Vextar in personal combat. The Krulon admiral was larger and stronger, but Lee was fighting for 200 million lives. When Vextar's claws raked across Lee's chest, tearing through his armor, Lee didn't fall. When the admiral's tail struck him in the head, Lee kept fighting. In the end, Lee won, but the wounds were too severe. As Vextar's ship surrendered and the Krulon fleet began to retreat, Lee collapsed on the deck of the enemy bridge. Commander Kim found him there as medics rushed to help. Captain, the evacuation is complete. The last transport just left Vethmore's surface. Lee tried to smile. All of them? All of them, sir. 200 million Volani safe and heading to their new world. Lee looked through the flagship's viewing window and saw Vethmor's sun flaring brighter than ever before. The star was finally beginning its death throes. In a few hours, the planet would be completely uninhabitable. "We did it," he whispered. "Yes, sir. We did it." But Lee knew the price they had paid. Dozens of human ships had been destroyed. Hundreds of volunteers had died, including Engineer Choi and so many others who had given their lives to save strangers. As the medical team worked to stabilize Lee's injuries, he thought about Choi's last words. She had kept her grandmother's promise. They all had. They had used their strength to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. The last evacuation ship jumped to hyperspace, just as Vethmor's sun began to collapse. Behind them, an entire world died. Ahead of them lay a new world where Volani children would grow up safe, free, and alive. Lee closed his eyes and let the medics work. They had won, but the real victory wasn't the battle. The real victory was that when faced with the choice between profit and compassion, between safety and righteousness, humanity had chosen correctly, even if it cost them everything. 6 months after the battle at Vethmor, Lee stood in a garden that shouldn't have existed. The planet that humans called Kepler 442c, and the Volani called New Vethmor, was blooming with life. Plants from both Earth and original Vethmor grew together in patterns that created something beautiful and completely new. Lee walked slowly, still recovering from his injuries. The wounds from his fight with High Admiral Vextar had healed, but they had left him weaker than before. He didn't mind. He was alive, and so were 200 million Volani. "Captain Lee," called a familiar voice. Mothek approached through the garden paths, but he looked different now. The young Volani, who had once been desperate and frightened, was now confident and proud. He wore the robes of a leader among his people. "Just Lee now," the former captain replied with a smile. "I'm not commanding anything these days." Mothek's large eyes showed concern. "The human doctors say you could return to active duty if you wanted." "I could, but I don't want to. This is where I need to be." They walked together toward the center of the garden where a memorial stood. It was made from stone quarried on New Vethmor, and metal salvaged from the ships destroyed in the battle. Names were carved into its surface, all the humans who had died to save the Volani people. Engineer Choi Haiwan's name was at the top. "We remember them every day," Mothek said quietly. "Every Volani child learns their names. They will never be forgotten," Lee nodded. That meant more to him than any medal or ceremony could. Dr. Sujin approached from across the garden. She was no longer just a translator. She had become the director of the Human Volani Cultural Exchange Institute. Her work helping the two species understand each other had become the foundation for their new shared civilization. "Lee, you need to see this," she said, holding up a data pad. "We just received a message from Earth. The Galactic Council has passed new laws requiring humanitarian assistance regardless of economic benefit. They're calling it the Volani Accord." Lee felt a warm satisfaction. The rescue hadn't just saved one species. It had changed how the galaxy thought about helping those in need. "There's more," Sujin continued. 17 different species have requested human assistance with various crises. We're getting more requests for help than we can handle." "That's a good problem to have," Lee said. From across the garden came the sound of laughter. Human and Volani children were playing together, chasing each other between the carefully tended plants. Some of the human children had been born here on New Vethmor, and they spoke both languages perfectly. Admiral Yun Boram, she had been promoted after her heroic actions in the battle, walked over to join them. She had been visiting the planet to discuss the new joint exploration missions that humans and Volani were planning together. "The first mixed crew ship launches next month," she reported. "Human technology and Volani ecological knowledge. The combination is proving incredibly effective." "What's their first mission?" Lee asked. "A distress call from the Outer Rim. Another species in trouble that the Council has been ignoring." Lee smiled. The pattern was repeating itself, but now it was bigger than just humanity. The Volani had joined the effort to help others, and species throughout the galaxy were beginning to follow their example. Elder Cathara approached, moving slowly but with dignity. She was older now, and the stress of the evacuation had aged her, but her eyes still held the kindness that had first moved Lee to action. "Lee," she said in her careful English, "I wanted to thank you again. You don't need to thank me. Elder, we did what anyone should have done. But no one else did, Kethera replied. Only humans answered our call. Only humans risked everything for strangers. Lee looked around at the thriving settlement. Vellani farmers worked alongside human engineers to design new types of crops. Artists from both species collaborated on sculptures and music that neither could have created alone. Children played games that borrowed rules from both cultures. We all answered the call, Lee said. Humans just happened to be the first ones listening. Commander Kim, now Captain Kim, arrived for the weekly memorial ceremony. He had taken over many of Lee's old duties, leading the expanded humanitarian fleet that had grown from their original rescue mission. The latest supply ships from Earth just arrived, he reported. They brought more volunteers and equipment for the new colonies we're establishing. How many now? Sujin asked. 43 worlds where we've helped resettle refugee populations. The program is expanding faster than we can keep up with. Lee felt a deep satisfaction. What had started as one ship responding to one distress call had become a galaxy-wide movement. Species that had never worked together before were now cooperating to help those in need. The memorial ceremony began as the sun set over New Vethmore. Representatives from dozens of species had come to pay their respects to those who died in the evacuation. The ceremony was broadcast throughout the galaxy, and Lee knew that millions of beings were watching. Young Vellani, who had never seen their original homeworld, sang songs about the humans who saved them. Human children who had been born on New Vethmore recited the names of heroes they had never met, but whose sacrifice had made their lives possible. When the ceremony ended, Lee walked back to his small house on the edge of the settlement. It was simple but comfortable, with a view of the mountains where the first Vellani cities were being built. As he sat on his porch, watching the stars appear in the alien sky, Lee thought about the message that had started everything. A desperate plea from a dying world, broadcast into empty space with little hope of an answer. But someone had been listening. Someone had cared, and that had made all the difference. A communication device on his table chimed softly. Another distress call, probably. There were always more people who needed help somewhere in the galaxy. Lee smiled and reached for the device. He might not be commanding ships anymore, but he could still coordinate rescue efforts from his garden on New Vethmore. "This is Lee," he said into the communicator. "We hear you and we're coming to help." Because that's what humans did. When someone called for help, they answered. When someone needed saving, they took the risk. When the choice was between safety and righteousness, they chose what was right. It was what made them human. And now, thanks to their example, it was what made the galaxy a little bit better than it had been before.